Welcome everyone back to the podcast. We have a special guest, which is Brandon Tumblin, and he has his own podcast as well called The Strong Stoic, which is a great podcast. Thank you for joining us, Brandon. How's your day going so far?
Hey man, it's good. It's been busy, but busy is good. So
There you go. And I wanted to ask you, what got you started in doing The Strong Stoic?
yeah, so I've always been philosophically inclined. Ever since I was a kid, I was always that weird kid that was kind of spaced off thinking about something. Um, so I've always been sort of just possessed by ideas and philosophy, self-help, psychology, all that stuff.
Mm.
Basically, always trying to find a way to get a new perspective on things, trying to find a way to live a more meaningful life, and find more ways to become more happy and all that stuff. So I've always been philosophically inclined. Now, as an introvert, as I'm sure you know, it's normally you kind of keep that stuff to yourself naturally. So growing up and stuff, it's kind of like you keep it to yourself, and it takes you a little while to sort of realize and accept that part of you. But I found that my close friends that I did have discussions with and good discussions with, I always sort of understood on some level that I always had a weird perspective on things, of sort of a different perspective. And I don't think in any way it's because I'm smarter or anything like that. I think it's just, and in fact, I think it's the opposite. I think it's because I'm a little simple in some ways. You know what I mean? Basically, like really chop things down in a simple way, and so on. So I was always kind of told that I had a different, unique perspective on things, and I guess over COVID, the first couple months of COVID, of course, everything got shut down. I moved to working from home. So I work as an engineer actually during the day, my day job. And so I got sent working from home, and I lived alone at the time. So 2 months by myself, started thinking about things. And I was trying to think about how I could best, I guess, share some of these ideas, and sort of get it out into the world. And because it has certainly had a good effect on a lot of people in my life. So I was thinking, like, what's the best way to sort of go after that passion, but also sort of share it and help other people find meaning in their lives. And of course I thought of this, which is the Strong Stoic podcast. And I basically just wanted to share ideas and really get feedback on it as well from other people, and just sort of put this stuff out into the world, and hopefully people would find it useful and live a more meaningful life and become happier and so on. And so yeah, that was my main motivation.
Yeah, it's really cool that you're also explaining finding ways to have more fulfilling life. And I think that's something people should be always pursuing. And there was one podcast you kind of did on daily habits to live a happier life. And I thought it really stood out to me how you're mentioning that. I believe it was like number 4, where we should be more grateful for things. And I feel like in life right now, well, for me, being an American, being here in the States, there's a bit of this instant gratification with Instagram, or even just materialism. We're just pushing that big time that we miss the little things that are in front of us. So what kind of pushed you to like make that podcast on daily habits to have a happier life?
Yeah. Well, so to be honest, that list was interesting. So I journal, not every day, but it's not so much of a what I'm doing today sort of journal. It's more of a, like, I guess, a spiritual journal. So I talk about the ideas, and I try and work out really what's going on in my head. I try and like organize it into thoughts. Right. And when I was in Mexico for a vacation, and just this one day, it was early in the vacation, and I was just kind of sitting out on the balcony, and I started thinking about this. I started thinking about, out of all the days, you have those days every now and then where things just go right, and you're lying in bed and you're just like, today was a good day. Like, it was just a good day. And you don't really know why, but you just know it was a good day. And I started thinking about that. And so I came up with this. I started just writing, and I started coming up with these, like, what are the common elements of those days that I found were the most meaningful to me during that day? And what are the commonalities, and see if I could abstract out sort of what I could do every day to sort of make, maybe not 100%, but more or less give me the best chance at having a good day. And so that's where that list came from. And I mean, I by no means think it's complete, and I don't think it's perfect, but that was certainly a big starting point for me when I was sort of thinking about that. And the gratitude thing is, it's interesting because, as you said, right now with COVID, and I know I'm up in Canada, but I know you guys in the US are having issues with that. We're having issues up here as well. But it seems often when we have something such as this pandemic that it's almost like there's nothing to be grateful for,
Mm,
because everyone's so focused on the negative. Everyone's so focused. It's like, okay, we can't go party. I can't see my friends. I can't go home for Christmas, whatever it is. And I think, like, I understand that, man. I get it 100% that it's hard, but I think at the same time, um, life is a tragedy, man. And I don't want to put a down negative spin on it, but like at the end of the day, there's a lot of bad things that are going to happen. And you need to find something to be grateful for, despite all the bad things that are happening, despite the COVID pandemic, despite you not getting home for Christmas. You need to find something to be grateful for. And I found that when I did that on a daily basis, and if it doesn't take that much energy, like if you look for something to be grateful for, you're going to find it, because everyone has something, right? Probably more than one thing.
it's true.
But I found that when I did that, I became more happier and I became more at peace, because it takes the focus off of the bad things that are happening and puts it on something that's positive and something that you appreciate.
Mm. And definitely, you mentioned about the journaling. I think that's great that you do that. It's almost like a reflection of your thoughts. And I feel like people should be doing that more often, because you can look back at your journal and be like, okay, maybe I can work on this more. Maybe I know more
Mm-hmm.
about myself. I think for me personally, when I don't have anything written down in my journal, I kind of go about my life not really understanding what direction I'm going in. When you're
Mm-hmm.
able to look back at your journey, you're like, okay, so I see where my pattern is or who I am more of so. And I feel like it's not really taught in the public system or just really common in society. So I just heard that little detail there about the journaling, which I think is great. That's where you're able to get some of your ideas for the podcasting, I'm sure. And I wanted to ask you, what is your thought process when you create a podcast or a topic or just select it?
Man, that's a good question. So when I started, I started just brainstorming, and I started making an Excel spreadsheet list of just a bunch of ideas, man. Just
Mm,
slapped it all down, and so I use that as guidance,
yeah.
if I'm in a slow rut. But generally, what happens with me, because I'm philosophically inclined, is I tend to get possessed by ideas, and
Mm,
it comes from anything, man. Like it could be like I could see like a TV show, and there's like an interaction that I see, and there's just something there, and I don't know what it is, but there's something there, and so I just think about it, and I think about it, and I think about it, and I try and work out what what's what's possessing me, and why it's possessing me. And normally what happens is, this is something that's a constant for me. I'm always thinking about something. So normally what I'll do is I'll just do an episode based on what idea is possessing me at that time.
mm,
And I try and haul in
mhm,
different perspectives, like, for example, if it's an idea on stoicism, I try and bring in Christianity a little bit, or I try and bring in
mm,
psychology a little bit. I try and attack it from different angles, and even fiction, works of fiction, bring in some movie quotes or whatever it is,
mm,
uh, really, so that more people can relate to it. Because I mean, the more angles you look at it, the more likely someone is actually going to be able to resonate with that perspective.
mm,
But yeah, I mean, that's basically it, man. It's just whatever's possessed me at the time. I try and work through it, and sometimes actually when I'm doing it, I don't actually know where I'm going with it. Like I have an outline and I have some notes, but I'm still trying to figure it out. Like while I'm doing it. And I think sometimes that might not work out, but I think generally it does, because it's I think it comes off as real, because I'm still struggling with this stuff and I'm still trying to understand it.
mm.
I'm not coming off as someone who's like, a professor who's like lecturing. It's more of a conversation with myself. Um, so that's pretty much
Wow.
it, man.
No, yeah, thank you. That was really good stuff, because I'm just thinking myself is like, I'm showing you're creating the topic. And I think I want to talk about like more on the introvert side I want to go back to that thought process, but I'm going to hold off on it. It's tempting, but definitely you as an introvert starting this podcast, what tips would you offer to someone that is kind of shy to put themselves out there? That's our biggest obstacle. What helped you be like, all right, I'm gonna put out the strong stoic. This is who I am. And you kind of mentioned a little bit, even though it's sometimes off the top of your head, you're still
Mhm.
gonna go for it. Like what tips would you offer them?
Yeah, so I think with introverts there's two elements that sort of hold you back from really putting yourself out there, right? I think one element is the confidence, the self-confidence, right? And I mean, that can be true with extroverts as well. Some, generally speaking, they don't have that issue, but introverts, normally it's like a confidence issue, meaning
Mm,
you are afraid to put yourself out there because you are afraid what other people will think, or you are afraid you're going to make yourself look like an idiot or whatever it is. There is that element of it. The other element that could be is, well, if you're an introvert, actually, it is. And that's, as an introvert, it's not your natural inclination to put yourself out there. So even though you might have the confidence to do it, it just, it doesn't come naturally to you. And a great example of this is like if you're at a party and you got like your one friend you're there with. If you're an introvert, you're probably like, you're going to stay with your friend. You're probably not going to naturally want to like go and talk to new people. If you're an extrovert, you're going to want to do that. You're going to want to like see a bunch of people and meet a lot of new people. And that's sort of ingrained into you. So what I would say is that if it's a confidence issue, if you are having issues, you're afraid what people are going to think or whatever it is, you got to start small. You just got to start small. And I think we can't change who we are. If you're an extrovert or if you're an introvert, you can't change that, man. You like, first of all, you got to accept that's who you are.
mm,
Uh, and I like to think of it like, if you're an introvert, what determines if you're an introvert or an extrovert depends on where you get your energy from. So like, if you're an introvert, you get your energy from like being at home, being by yourself. And then when you go out in crowds, it drains you. It drains your gas tank. If you're an extrovert, you go out in crowds, fills up your gas tank. When you're alone, it drains it. And you're like, oh my God, I need to go see some people, Yeah. So like if you're an introvert and you're having issues with the confidence thing, you need to start small, and you need to recognize that there is a lot of value in extroversion. Not that you can change yourself and become an extrovert, but what you can do is you can equip yourself with the proper skills and tools to allow you to succeed in an extroverted environment. Because there are a lot of benefits to extroverted skills, like social
mm,
skills. If you need to be able to talk to people, you need to be able to network and communicate properly, and those are extroverted skills. And so, as an introvert, if you're having that issue, you got to start small. And depending on how extreme your introversion is and how your confidence is, it might be like shaking someone's hand, right? Like that's an issue that some people with low self-esteem and they're really introverted, they have issues actually shaking people's hand and introducing themselves. So like, you got to start with that. Now, if you want to do a podcast, that's like, there's a lot of steps in between that you have to get up to. But
right.
I think what you have to do is you have to start exposing yourself to extroversion so that you can get those skills and make yourself successful. But don't overdo it, man. Like you don't need to like record yourself and like put it on YouTube. Like start with like a tweet or something, like get on Twitter, start tweeting some of your thoughts. Once you get comfortable, like you're going to be nervous at first. And then after like a couple of weeks, you're going to be like, okay, like I don't care. I'll just tweet. It doesn't matter. And then you can maybe I'll post a picture of myself or with a quote underneath it, or maybe I'll record some audio. And then you slowly build up that confidence to the point where you're like, okay, like I have what I want now. And it's going to take a long time. I think one of the things that we
Right.
have issues with in our culture is we want everything right away.
Mm,
Like if you're starting a podcast, you want like a brand new camera, and you want like a really nice mic, and you want a great logo, and you want all these perfect things to align. But it's like, there's nothing stopping you from just post a picture, man. Start with that and then work your way up. Post some audio, and then you can actually start recording yourself, and you can always upgrade. But if you start too big, it's going to be too much for you, and you're going to get too stressed out from it. So
I really
just to
like
summarize, I would say start small. Yeah.
starting small. I like how you said just simply don't focus on the big time equipment. I remember talking to somebody, they're not necessarily doing podcasting, but they want to make videos. But it's like, hey, if you have your phone, just start recording. The point is to start, even just for the introverts out there that are listening, that's where it really begins, because then you learn. It's like a nonstop process. I'm sure you're learning a
Mm-hmm.
lot too on podcasting, how to
Oh
grow
yeah.
your audience, and even for myself. And so I think it was great that you just said that, just to get the ball rolling with small little things. And I wanted to ask you, why do you think that kind of like our society doesn't really acknowledge introverts that much? It's more of a extroverted world, very fast paced, and COVID kind of slowed everything down. But I don't
Mm.
know if it's still giving light to introverts and their strengths?
Yeah, that's a great question, man. That really is. I mean, the obvious answer for me would be that introverts are less likely to put themselves out there, right?
Mm,
So I think if you look at an extroverted person and you compare them to an introverted person, the extroverted person is much more likely to introduce themselves to new people. They're much more likely to go out in public, to go out in parties. They're much more likely to be the loud one in the room.
mm,
So I think naturally, if you're in a room, where's your eyes? Your eyes is on whoever's talking. Who's likely to be talking? Extroverts. So I think there is this. And that's a very good question. And it's a very good point because there is this focus in our culture on extroverts, and I don't. It's not. It's not that they're stealing the show. I mean, they are stealing the show, but it's almost like the introverts' fault because like we got to be able to like speak up and again, you can't change if you're introverted, you can't change that, but you can equip yourself with the skills and you can
mm.
get your voice out there as you need to. So yeah, I think that's why. That makes sense, I think.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. You definitely, overall, this podcast so far, you're bringing a lot of light to the differences of introverts and extroverts and the strengths. And I really like that a lot. And there's one podcast I noticed too that it's different, but it was about men. How no is are men and women different? And there was like one
Mm.
topic you're talking about forcing an outcome for women, and it's about equal opportunity, which I totally agree with. But then you were mentioning how the outcome can sometimes be forced. Can you give more clarity on that? How society can tell? I'll give a little bit of glimpse of what I heard, and you could clean it up. And it was
Mm-hmm.
like society would tell women we need more in engineering field or something like that, but their interest is more like, yeah, I'd rather do teaching or psychology or therapy, which statistics show that more women are going that direction. But why is society forcing women to go into like engineering or a field they might not be interested in that much?
Yeah, I don't know why the big push. I think it came from. I mean, historically there has been some oppression of women. Like that has been a thing. You
Mm,
can't, and I don't think anyone can really deny that. I don't think it was the only reason, but I think in the push for equality, um, I think you just go too far at some point, and I think that
mm,
point is when you start fixing the outcomes of the jobs, right? And in that episode, I talked about how like it's our biology in a large way. Like we have our conscience, right? Like we're conscious beings, but we're still a slave to our biology.
mm,
And our biology, basically, if you go all the way back, it's like, okay, well, what we generally there's two genders, there's two sexes, right? There's a male and a female. One carries a child, one does not. Well, if you're the gender that's carrying the child, you're
right.
probably more likely to be compassionate and empathetic. Now, that doesn't mean that you are, but it means that you're more likely because, I mean, you have to be compassionate to carry another living being inside your belly, right?
True.
And I think guys don't really have that capacity in the same way. So I think our biology drives these differences between men and women, and they're not huge. And I tried to make that clear in that episode that I'm not saying they're massive, and there's certainly not like there's not like a huge divide between men and women.
Right.
But generally speaking, women do tend to be a bit more agreeable, and men are a bit more, generally a bit more masculine, a bit more driven, and
Yeah.
so on. And and I think I don't think there's anything wrong with either. Like I did an engineering degree, and I mean my best friend in engineering was a girl, was a woman, and we sat together in class and we studied together, and we did all our projects together. Like I think it's completely fine. I really have no issue with that. But if you were to force the outcome, saying uh, engineering 50% women, 50% men, you're not taking into account the differences in personality, which are a result from the differences in biology. And you
Mm,
can't really fix that because, generally speaking, engineering is going to appeal to more men because they're more interested in things as opposed to people. That's why you see most nurses are women because they're interested in people. They're more compassionate and empathetic. And if we level the playing field and we have equality of opportunity, and it turns out that there's 50% men and 50% women, fine, like nothing wrong with that. But if we
right.
fix it, if we say we need 50% women, 50% men engineers, I got an issue with that because you're not taking in, it's not freedom. You're forcing something. It's taking away the freedom of the people as opposed to giving it back.
I like how you said that. It's true. There's like a narrative that's being pushed, and it's kind of unfortunate that if people see a lack of, let's say the percentages that there's like 30% of women going into engineering, just making this up, they're going to
Hmm.
start believing like there's this, like there was oppression, like you said, and it's very serious. But now that there's equal opportunity, it's leveled now for anyone to come in. They're going to believe the narrative that they're still being held back, which is unnecessarily true. It's kind of there for them for the taking. And it's
Hmm.
kind of unfortunate that that's being pushed because, like you said, you made a great kind of like a contrast. Men are more with things and women are more with people, which is great. That's a balance. That's important in society. Both play important roles. And I feel like certain narratives are pushing that away. I
Hmm.
think you mentioned that on the podcast too, how there's different attributes for each person. But if we just kind of ignore it or don't really put too much attention to it, people would just be like, well, this looks more important, more appealing. So I want to go after that.
Hmm.
But there was another one podcast that I thought was amazing that you did was putting people in a box, and it stood out
Mm.
to me because I'm like, we can assume like, all right, I could read this person, I know what they're about, but we stop ourselves or cap ourselves at learning more about them and really preventing ourselves from building a good, strong relationship with them.
Mm.
What do you feel
Yeah.
like? Why do you feel like our ego, or I don't know if it can be ego, you could probably clear that up, that kind of stops us from really getting to know people more?
Yeah. I think it actually comes from almost a biological drive. I'm going to go back to biology again, but I think it's true because what happens is we naturally want to simplify things, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and we have to do that. Like we absolutely have to do that. If you're like, if you think about it, if you're walking down the street, your mind has simplified everything around you, meaning you don't look at the pavement anymore so much. You know, you're looking at new things. You're like, if there's a car coming, it's like, okay, that's a danger. I'm going to look at that. But you're not like staring up at the sky. You're not staring at the tree. Like it'd be too much to take in.
Mm,
So what our brains naturally do is they try and simplify things, right? And
mm,
one of the way it simplifies things is it categorizes things. So if you meet someone and you know, and maybe they're a bodybuilder and they're really big or something, it's so easy for your brain to just go, "Oh, bodybuilder, stupid, meathead, eats a lot of protein." And that, you know, that's true. And I mean, you know, I'm a gym rat myself, so I can make these jokes, uh, but it's so easy for our brain to do that, and I think it's just because we're trying to simplify things. We're trying to make it easier for us to understand, and I think we need to do that to some degree. We need to do that, but at the same time, when you're actually having a conversation with someone, and when you're trying to form a connection, and when you're meeting people, you need to try and shut that off because
mm,
you're missing the opportunity to grow, to change your perspective, to meet someone
mm.
new, to gain connections, and so on. Um, and again, it's impossible to turn it off, but if you can focus it in and say, okay, well, you know what, I'm gonna try and get rid of all my biases, actually have a conversation with this person, not make any assumptions. I think everyone would be better off.
Doing that. And I want to ask you, with the culture in Canada and also with the US in terms of like the equal opportunity, do you feel like they're far off in any way?
I don't think so. I lived in the States for 2 years,
Mm,
and I've done a lot of traveling as well. Like I went to Europe. I've lived in London, England for a while, and
oh,
mostly
wow.
Western countries. But what I would say is that, man, like I think the equality of opportunity in the US and Canada, I think it's pretty damn good. Like I really do. And I mean, uh, it's one of those things where we fought for so long to have equality of opportunity.
Mm,
And like, if you think about the history of mankind, I mean, Jesus is like, we haven't had it that long. And I think it's easy for us to still get caught up and looking at those things in a negative way. But man, like from my perspective, I think if you're born in Canada, if you're born in the US, I think you got it pretty damn good. Like I really do.
I hear you. I know there's other parts of the world that is struggling to give that to women, and that there we clearly see no oppression. But I think now
Yes,
the battle for the people that have it here pretty solid, they should kind of focus their energy to help those women over there.
absolutely.
But yeah, I usually go into the topic of COVID-19 as we're nearing the end of the podcast. I wanted to ask you, man, what was the biggest challenge this year with COVID-19 for yourself?
The biggest challenge. Ooh, that's a good one. Well, I'd say as an introvert, being alone, being secluded from people didn't bother me that much, which is a
Same.
which is a benefit for being an introvert. But at the same time, though, uh, I would say that if you are an introvert, one of the things I mentioned you should do is try and force yourself to have friends, and actually meet new people and form connections with people, because it doesn't come naturally to you. And I would say for me that's been a challenge as well, even for me, because generally, like in before COVID, normally you have your friends and they ask you to come out. It's like, hey, let's go drinking, or let's go do this, or let's do whatever. And then you have these opportunities to go out, and then you pick and choose which ones you want to do, based on how much alone time you need. You know what I mean? So, but after COVID, man, that shut off. So,
Mm.
I say generally speaking, I did okay with COVID, being secluded. But at the same time, like, I think whether you're introverted or extroverted, I think you need friends and you need human connections, and
Mm.
you need to see people. And I would say in some degree that's affected me. Yeah, for sure. That's been a challenge.
And what do you feel is the biggest lesson that COVID-19 has taught you?
Oh, the biggest lesson, geez.
Right.
Honestly, well, no, I would say that the biggest thing that COVID has taught me is how quickly things can go bad.
Mm.
And it's interesting because
Crazy.
what tends to happen, there's this cycle that tends to happen with people, is they go through good times, or they go through a rough spurt, right? And then they kind of like they make their life better, and then they get in the good times and they're really happy and everything's going well. And then the bad times come again, and then
Mm.
you're on a downslope. And then if you stick through it and you make it through that, things are going to get better again. And then again, it's going to go worse again. And
Mm.
it's easy for us to, when we're in the good times, which I think we were before COVID. Like, I don't think there was a better time in history before COVID. Like, because, like, man, like, the economy was doing well, and people could do whatever they wanted. Like, we had so much freedom here in the West, and it was so good. And then all of a sudden it's like, bam, COVID hit. No more friends, lockdown, nobody go outside, people lose their jobs, bad things happen. And what COVID really, I guess, reinforced for me and made me realize is that, like, when you're in the good times, man, you gotta prepare for the bad times.
Mm.
Like, if you look at the people who, I mean, everyone suffered from COVID in some regard, but if you look at the people who really suffered, I think a lot of times, it's because they haven't prepared for it, and the culture that we build, the culture that we have around is it's a lot of, it's built on a lot of image, so, like, I know a lot of young people, what they do is they get their paycheck and they buy new clothes, and then they're like, they have no savings, and they're just riding that wave of, like, glory and goodness. And it's like, that's fine, but at the same time, you got to realize that something bad is going to happen at some point, and you should
Mm.
prepare for it. You should put away a bit of money. You should maybe not buy that brand new car. You know what I mean? Like, maybe
Mm.
maybe do something to prepare for that, and because it's going to come. Like, bad times are going to come again, and that sucks. And I think COVID was one of the biggest ones that's happened in my lifetime. But at the same time, the other thing you need to realize is that when the bad times come, it sucks, but the good times are going to come back again. It's just natural. It's going to happen. You gotta suffer through it. You gotta persevere, and the good times will come again for sure.
Yeah, I know that COVID-19 also did some travel restrictions. Were you ever thinking about possibly moving out of Canada and try another country or another kind of moving around Canada yourself?
No, I actually did move in the middle of COVID. I was living in
Wow.
yeah, yeah. I was living in Quebec,
Oh,
which
wow.
is yeah, French Quebec, and I moved to Ontario in the middle of COVID. I switched jobs.
Mm.
But it was weird, man, because normally when you start a new job, you meet all the new people and everything, and that didn't happen this time around. It was like pretty much you go right into working from home, right? So, like, I only know like a few people in my company, so it's kind of weird. But no, the travel restrictions, I know. I mean, for me, the biggest thing is Christmas time now. Normally, I go home and I see my
Mm.
family, and that's been kind of tough because I can't do that. The regulations. It's like,
Right.
it's And I'm sure a lot of people are suffering from that, because Christmas time is, especially in North America, like Christmas time is family time. And I think people are suffering from that.
I hear you on that. And I want to say, Brandon, thank you for just really hopping on the podcast. Any shout outs that you want to do or to bring up on your podcast as well? The Strong.
Strong Stoke.
Yeah,
sure. Strong Stoke podcast. Like I say, I put out episodes every Tuesday and Thursday on whatever ideas possessing me at the time. So it's always interesting for me anyway. But you can find me I'm mostly active on Instagram. Actually, you can find me on Instagram. But I'm all over the place, all over social media. So just the Strong Stoic podcast, you should be able to find me.
Awesome. I just want to say thank you again, Brandon, for being on here. And that'll be wrapping it up for the podcast. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you for having me. Cheers.
Of course.